Coming of age.
Coming of age.
Coming of age.
Coming of age stories have probably been around since we as a species started telling each other tales around the fire. From Hercules and his 12 labors to Paul's ascension on Arrakis, the idea of growing up to become the person you were meant to be is something that resonates deeply with the human condition. Even if for most of us, coming of age is more about learning to do your taxes and not touching your doodle at 2 AM than it is about completing Herculean feats or overthrowing galactic empires. Regardless, some of my favorite stories have revolved around the theme of coming of age. One such story is that old Nickelodeon classic, Avatar the Last Airbender. Given that it's next on my list of sacred childhood memories that may or may not be brutalized by a Netflix live-action adaptation,
Sounds to me like blackmail.
You're damn right it is, because Jet, you are black and you are male.
I think now is a fitting time to take a moment and remember what made Avatar one of the greatest coming-of-age stories of my generation. While Nickelodeon has released some classics over the years, Avatar has to be its most timeless series ever, taking on themes you typically wouldn't associate with a Nickelodeon production. SpongeBob never had to bring peace to Bikini Bottom, and Arnold wasn't the sole survivor of a racial genocide. For a kids show, Avatar dealt with some heavy shit. Though it never felt that way when I first watched it, I was too engrossed in the world building, the adventure, and obviously the bending. Beneath Avatar's flashy bending and witty dialogue, though, is a story I've increasingly related to as I've grown. That's right. Over the years, I've come to draw more and more parallels between my own coming of age and that of a fictional bald vegan airboy. And before you judge me to be the man-child that I may or may not be, let me try explain myself through my two favorite characters in the series. You ever wake up to the droning rattle of your alarm at some ungodly hour of the morning, and reflecting on the day ahead of you, instead of crawling out of bed to rise to the occasion, you just don't? You turn over and sink back into the blissful, unconscious escape of sleep. That's kinda how Aang's story begins. Except, instead of putting off a day at school by sleeping in, he puts off his responsibility as Avatar, sacred peacekeeper of the world, by hibernating in an ice cube for 100 years. And damn, can you blame him? When I was 12 years old, I was still figuring out how to stop my ass cheeks from sweating whenever I made eye contact with the opposite sex. The fact that Aang is 12 years old is something that the writers understood well. When he is unfrozen, he doesn't immediately focus on taking his place as the Avatar. He does the 12-year-old thing and asks Katara,
"Will you go penguin sledding with me?"
Sure, I guess.
Makes sense, right? Most of us don't seek out adulthood. It seeks us out. Whether that be through responsibilities that we previously never had, changes in relationships with those around us, or the consequences of a world without an Avatar. Learning that he was the last airbender alive, discovering his dead master, and witnessing the war in the Earth Kingdom. All these events confronted Aang with the fact that though he was only 12, he was no longer a carefree boy in the Air Temple. As much as the series is about Aang physically overcoming one problem after the next, it's just as much about his mental growth in accepting that he is the Avatar. The writers do a good job in showing this through Aang's mastering of the elements. Water is easy for him to pick up, but due to his fear of confrontation, he struggles with earth. He also refuses to firebend out of fear of hurting others. His eventual mastery of these final two elements showed not only that he physically was ready to face the Fire Lord, but perhaps more importantly, that he had matured mentally and accepted his responsibility as Avatar. I know Aang had bigger problems, but like us, He didn't ask to have the world thrust upon his shoulders. Perhaps that's what makes him as relatable as he is. At some point in our comparatively small and inconsequential lives, we all face down our own personal ozais. And I like to think that although everybody encounters their own ozai, everybody is also their own Aang. At some point in our journeys toward adulthood, most of us eventually realize that our parents and role models aren't the invincible figures we thought them to be, and that the life they want us to live may not be the one we want for ourselves. Perhaps you realized you never wanted to go to college, or to become an accountant, or in Zuko's case,
I lost it all. I want it back. I want the Avatar. I want my honor, my throne. I want my father not to think I'm worthless.
Zuko begins the series chasing what he thought was his destiny, mistaking his father's ambitions as his own. It's only in pursuit of this supposed destiny, and through the guidance of Iroh, that he slowly begins to question what he's doing.
I know my own destiny, Uncle.
Is it your own destiny? Or is it a destiny someone else has tried to force on you?
The self-reflection Zuko undertakes mirrors what a lot of us have either experienced or are currently going through in life. By the time most of us realize what we actually want to do with our lives, we're already 50k deep in uni debt, or locked into a 9-to-5 that we were told was a good career choice. Likewise, Zuko took his father's word as gospel for the majority of the series, and by the time he saw that he'd been misguided, he'd already locked himself in by betraying his uncle and ingratiating himself with Ozai. To veer off the path we'd already set ourselves on usually takes an uncomfortable amount of sacrifice. For Zuko, this is marked by the confrontation in the throne room, as it was in this scene that, in order to live life on his terms, he abandons the one thing he'd always wanted, his father's acceptance. When we first watched Avatar, we were likely no older than Aang and his friends, and we saw the show for the adventure that it was. Though Avatar is a pretty fun watch, that isn't why it's as beloved and as relevant as it is. Aang and Zuko came of age over the year that the show takes place, but it's taken us viewers a lot longer to do the same. Perhaps this is why so many of us keep coming back to this almost 2-decade-old cartoon. Unbeknownst to our younger selves, we weren't just watching a show about flashy bending and young heroes overcoming a tyrant. We were learning what it meant to grow up.